The Sunday school lessons for June 15th, 2025 are Abraham makes an offering and the value of a life. Genesis chapter 22, verses 1 through 14. Welcome, viewers and subscribers to my channel, The Backstory and More. I am Audrey. If you are new here, please know that this is an audio reading of the lesson and the lesson summary. Verses 1 through 2. Sometime later, God tested Abraham. He said to him, "Abraham." "Here I am," he replied. Then God said, "Take your son, your only son, whom you love, Isaac, and go to the region of Moriah. Sacrifice him there as a burnt offering on a mountain I will show you." Verses 3 through 4. Early the next morning, Abraham got up and loaded his donkey. He took with him two of his servants and his son Isaac. When he had cut enough wood for the burnt offering, he set out for the place God had told him about. On the third day, Abraham looked up and saw the place in the distance. Verses 5 through 7. He said to his servants, "Stay here with the donkey, while I and the boy go over there. We will worship, and then we will come back to you." Abraham took the wood for the burnt offering and placed it on his son Isaac, and he himself carried the fire and the knife. As the two of them went on together, Isaac spoke up and said to his father Abraham, "Father?" "Yes, my son," Abraham replied. "The fire and wood are here," Isaac said, "but where is the lamb for the burnt offering?" Verses 8 through 9. Abraham answered, "God himself will provide the lamb for the burnt offering, my son." And the two of them went on together. When they reached the place God had told him about, Abraham built an altar there and arranged the wood on it. He bound his son Isaac and laid him on the altar on top of the wood. Verses 10 through 12. Then he reached out his hand and took the knife to slay his son. But the angel of the Lord called out to him from heaven, "Abraham, Abraham." "Here I am," he replied. "Do not lay a hand on the boy," he said. "Do not do anything to him. Now I know that you fear God, because you have not withheld from me your son, your only son." Verses 13 through 14. Abraham looked up, and there in a thicket he saw a ram caught by its horns. He went over and took the ram and sacrificed it as a burnt offering instead of his son. So Abraham called that place, "The Lord will provide." And to this day it is said, "On the mountain of the Lord it will be provided." A summary. The phrase "sometime later" indicates an unspecified number of years since Isaac's birth. Abraham was 100 years old when Isaac was born, and now Isaac was old enough to carry on a conversation and carry wood. Despite common perceptions that Isaac was a boy, some speculate that Isaac could have been a young man. Though without clear support in Scripture, some speculate that Isaac could have been the same age as Jesus was when his father was willing to sacrifice his only son, whom he loved. The word test does not imply a temptation to do evil. Abraham's response, "Here I am," was as elegantly simple as it was proper. God's test for Abraham was quite startling. The sacrifice of his son Isaac, who notably is referred to as Abraham's only son, namely the only son of promise. It may seem scandalous that God would ask Abraham to sacrifice his child, but God had his as yet undisclosed purpose and was willing to test his servant in this manner. Furthermore, Abraham knew that in a very real sense, Isaac was God's son. He would not have been born were it not for God. Would he have thought it unreasonable for God to ask that such a gift be returned? Abraham obviously did not want to offer up Isaac as a sacrifice. God had promised to bless all nations through Abraham's offspring. Thus, God's test was whether Abraham trusted God enough to fulfill his promise should the unthinkable occur. If Abraham passed this test, then he clearly would become the great man of faith that God knew he could be when he called him out from Ur. Abraham discovered, however, that God's tests are not always predictable. Such tests in life must be faced as they come. Abraham failed in some of his earlier tests, but his faith and obedience had grown since then. The parallels between Isaac and Jesus are significant. As previously stated, Isaac, in a way, was a son of God. The place is almost important, is also important. Moriah is in the vicinity of Jerusalem and in the precise spot where Solomon later built the temple. So the place where God asked Abraham to offer his son is the same place the Israelites will later sacrifice their offerings, and very close to where God will offer up his own son, Jesus. The image of Isaac walking up a hill and carrying wood on which he is to be a sacrifice also seems eerily prophetic. Abraham wastes no time carrying out his assignment. Early in the next morning, he made preparations and set out to perform this dreadful task. There was no haggling with God, such as he did in Genesis 18, verses 22 through 33. If Abraham's point of departure was Beersheba, then the multi day trip to Moriah was about 50 miles. When they arrived, Abraham dismissed the servants and told them that both he and Isaac would worship and then return. On the way, Isaac eventually asked why there was no animal with them for the sacrifice. Abraham's response that God himself will provide the lamb for the burnt offering was remarkable because the narrative does not indicate that he knew that God would provide an animal. At the last moment, God intervened and stopped Abraham through the angel of the Lord. This may not have been what Abraham expected to happen. He had reasoned that God could raise Isaac from the dead. Hebrews 11, chapter 11, verses 17 through 19. But the angel now revealed that God had been testing Abraham's fear of God. And right then, Abraham noticed in a thicket a ram caught by its horns, which he sacrificed instead of Isaac. The designation, the Lord will provide, Jehovah literally means the Lord sees to it. Abraham used the same word in responding to Isaac's earlier question. Abraham told Isaac that the Lord would see to it that an animal was provided. Thank you so much for listening. Join me soon for the next audio reading of the lesson and the lesson summary. And remember to subscribe to the channel.